want to thank you for joining us for the Compassionate Friends Sibling panel. I think this will be my 18th year facilitating Sibling panel. For those unaware, this is just one of the many great workshops presented at the TCF National Conference. Can't believe it's going to be only 3 months away. We're excited to offer you today a panel of siblings from different backgrounds and experiences who will share their perspectives and answer questions in an effort to help families reopen the door to communication. Before we begin and let the panel introduce themselves, I quickly wanted to go over some housekeeping items. Um, I don't know that we have the ability to. I thought they were going to have the ability to type in a chat. Does everybody have the ability to type in the chat? Yes, they do. Can we get a thumbs up or type one if this is the first time you're attending a Compassionate Friends sibling panel? Let's see. Hannah. Oh. Gotta take a look. I just kind of want to get a feel to see how many. Uh, Wanted to know, see how many were the first timers we have tonight. Also wanted to kind of see, can we get a thumbs up and a raised hands if you only want us to tell you what you want to hear, right? We understand how passionate and important these topics are. We feel that there may be things you need to hear versus what you want to hear. So we just ask that you come here with an open and understanding heart. Um, I know we're on Zoom, so it's a little easier to can't beat us up, but really, we really going to give you our thoughts and perspectives, and want to kind of um, Allie, go ahead. What are you gonna say?
The chat is disabled. So if people can write in the Q&A if they want to, but the chat is disabled.
Oh, okay,
Making
gotcha.
that note on the Q&A. So I'm just
I'm
sharing.
working on trying to disenable it. So let me get
No worries. It was really my segue into after doing this for so many years, we read the feedback and comments and really it's just kind of getting the parents to understand, look, it's not always something you want to hear, but it's maybe something you need to hear, right? It's some of the feedback is going to be honest, and so we just kind of wanted to
it.
mention that. Um, so with that said, time's going to go by fast, so kind of let's move on. Move on to our introductions. I'll start first. My name is Keith Singer. I lost my sister Lori in a car accident while serving active duty in the United States Navy. She was traveling stateside to hunt new orders. Yesterday marked 28 years without my sister. I volunteer to honor my sister's memory. Um, let's kind of I'll call out the members of our sibling panel and ask them to quickly introduce themselves. Let's start off with Maggie Bauer.
Hey everyone, I'm Maggie, Chris's little sister. My older brother, Chris, and only sibling died August of 2012 by suicide. And I live in Minnesota. I'm an hour north of the Twin Cities. I own a farm.
Hmm, very cool. Thank you. Welcome, Maggie. We have Jenny Perez. Did I see Jenny on? Let's see. Is Jenny here yet? No, Jenny yet. We'll move on. Jason Wendroff Wernicke.
Sure. My name is Jason Wendroff-Ronicki. I'm a body-centered grief therapist, and I lost my sister Lauren in a car accident in 1998. I also run the TCF SIBS online program. So we get together every week online to be able to talk about sibling issues specific to our loss.
Very cool. Then we have Allie Franklin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Allie Franklin. My brother Austin died when I was a young child, and he was a young child of a brain tumor. I live in Florida, and I'm a healthcare consultant and have been involved with TCF since I was 16. Nice to meet you all.
We have very cool. We have Sarah Thompson.
Hello, I'm Sarah. I'm Ryan's sister. Ryan passed from a heroin overdose in January of 2014, 3 days shy of his 22nd birthday. TCF has been an absolute blessing to me, and I am happy to be on this panel today.
Awesome. And we have, let's see, Andrea Keller.
Hi, I'm Andrea. I lost my brother John to an accidental heroin overdose. It will be 17 years in May. He was 34, and I am the sibling chapter leader for Potomac, Maryland, the TCF Potomac chapter, and I also moderate the online Facebook group for those siblings who have lost from substance use.
Thank you. And I think Katie, did you figure out that technical issue?
I don't have my camera up. I think I'm going to jump off after the introduction and try and log back in. I'm Katie. My sister Kristen died. It will be 15 years in October after complications from outpatient surgery. And I'm a chapter leader in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and a regional coordinator for Indiana.
Awesome. And we have Lucy Rossi.
Hi, my name's Lucy. I am a registered nurse in Kansas City, Kansas. I am Doug and Tony's little sister. Doug died in 1990 at the age of 23 in a motorcycle accident when I was 9 months old. And my second brother, Tony, died in 2009 at the age of 35 from cardiac issues when I was a freshman in college. I'm the chapter leader for our Johnson County, Kansas TCF SIBS group, as well as one of the Facebook moderators for TCF SIBS.
Awesome. And I have Heidi Horsley.
Hi, everyone. I'm Heidi Horsley, and I am the executive director for the Open to Hope Foundation. We've done a lot of stuff on sibling loss, so please check us out. I am also a psychologist and a professor at Columbia University, teaching about grief and loss, teaching about sibling loss. But most importantly, everything I do is in honor of my brother and cousin who died together in a car accident at 17.
Sure. I have Chris Lorenko.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Lorenzo. I serve in honor of my two brothers, Zach and Alex, who were electrocuted on July 4th of 2003. My dad and I were both there when they were electrocuted as well. I've been involved with TCF now for almost 20 years as well, and I'm wrapping up my 6th year on the TCF Board of Directors. Happy to be here.
Awesome, awesome. And we have a panel of two members that are having some technical issues. So if we get them to jump in, we can get them on. That'll be awesome. We'll do a quick jump in. But for now, we are going to start. If you would like to send in some questions, please send it over into the Q&A section. I'm not sure if anybody are able to get the chat going, but there should be a button on the somewhere on the bottom that lets you. And actually, there you are, Cindy. Before we go in last, but I want to mention for sure, fielding the chat and helping us with the questions will be the one and only Cindy Tart. I saw you put your camera on, so I knew you were stepping away for a minute.
No, I trying to figure this technology out. It was not cooperating, but I'm thankful to be here. I'm Dennis's big sister, and February 5th of this year made 40 years without my little buddy. And I've been with TCF almost that long.
Crazy. Time goes fast. I can't believe it. Can't believe it. So just to kind of set the tone, if you guys want to start putting in questions, we do have some topics if there's none, but generally usually we get lots of questions and I'll kind of go through there. Cindy, you'll start feeding and fielding them to me, and we'll kind of go from there. So panel, the first question I have we received was, I was looking for suggestions on how to approach my son about the fact that he never talks about his deceased brother. Jake adopted Nikki's two babies 4 years ago. Everyone is happy and well adjusted. It just bothers me that he never talks about them. Oh, this one's always a Chris. Go ahead. Yeah, I'll do it in the order that I say.
I would just say, for my personal experience, I think it's very normal not to want to talk to family members about our loss. For me personally, I never sought out my parents or my grandparents or anyone like that to talk to. I think it's important that they know there's resources available. such as TCF, to have other people to talk to. But I think a lot of times, and again, I'm just speaking personally, um, it's not, I was never really comfortable talking to my parents about my loss. And I think that's a pretty common thread amongst a lot of siblings that we don't want to necessarily talk about our loss with our parents. I know for me personally, I always felt like I would upset my parents if I talked to them. And so I kind of held back from sharing how I was feeling with them.
Yeah, Lucy, you want to add it to that?
Yeah, I mean, to echo what Chris is saying, sometimes I don't want to talk to my parents, my dad especially, just because of how I know he's going to react or how he's reacted in the past. I also really want to mention that, and I think the panel would all agree with me, that just because we aren't talking to our parents about our grief does not mean that we aren't talking to anybody. A lot of us are talking to each other, and utilizing the other resources like TCF, that are available.
And Jason? Oh, you're on mute.
Wants me to unmute. Yeah. The messages that we get is that we have to be strong for our parents, and we have to be there for you guys. And that invalidates our own grief. So a lot of the times, like I know when I lost my sister, I didn't even realize that I was supposed to be grieving because I had to be strong for them. So there's that part of we kind of shut down, and we find ways of dealing with it outside, and it may not look like the same way that you deal with it. I find that when I lost my sister, the relationship I had with my parents was magnified. So, I didn't really talk to them about like a whole lot of deep issues to start. And then my sister passed and it just got magnified.
Yeah, I think also the takeaway I think is they may not be talking to you, right? And I think that's different than not talking about them at all, right? So that's two different issues. But I think also more importantly, and I'm not sure if I heard, Buzz, is did you ever mention that you would want to talk about your, so maybe opening the door to communication by bringing it up and mentioning it to say, hey, I never hear you really talk about your brother. It would make me really happy, if we can, we continued, we started talking about him. But I think opening that door to communication is important. I know it seems obvious, but we hear both sides for so many years. It really is because you ask these, well, did you ask and mention that you would want to talk about them? And how many times do we hear that? Oh, well, no, right? So I think an important piece there is also try to open that door to communication and see if they'd be open to talking about it. Let me just double check. Okay, good. Let's see. Let's go on to the next question. We have as parents who we have as parents who lost our son, and we have our remaining son who is 26 and feels sometimes he pulls away. We wonder if it's the awkwardness of being the only child now, as we feel that a bit and trying to get used to it without focusing on the loss. We want to focus on our love for him and any other and or any other reasons you may have found that you pull away. Maggie.
Yeah, so I am an adult, I guess, only child now. And I think one of the things, the aspects of losing my only sibling is that this this ping pong of dynamics that we were a unit of four and now we're a unit of three. And like all of that energy and all of their concern comes directly to me instead of being shared with my brother as it was. I was 28 when he died and he was 31. So I didn't know, I never knew what it felt like to not have a sibling until I was nearly 30 years old. So I think that's definitely one of the pieces to acknowledge, and we're trying to figure out how to fit into the family unit because it's forever different.
Right. Jason.
And the pressure to kind of go on what Maggie was saying, and the pressure of being the only child left is quite great. Not that when I went through it, my parents didn't necessarily put that pressure on me, but I put that pressure on myself. So the value that I put even on my life or to taking risks or to doing things like that were just held back because I couldn't go out on a limb because I was afraid that if something were to happen to me, I didn't want to put them through it. So the pressure that and that caused I know that caused me to pull back just because of the pressure that it caused.
Yeah, I would agree. Sarah?
I think a lot of times for me, it was I just may not have been ready to feel the feelings that my parents were feeling when they wanted to talk about things. So, they're a little upset. I'm not in that mindset. I don't want to be in that mindset. And same goes for when I am in that mindset. Sometimes I just want them to be mom and dad. I don't want them to also get upset at the same time. And I felt, especially in the beginning, that anytime that I would go to my parents, it became about their grief and not about mine.
Yeah, I also will throw in as a personal experience. I was 21 away at college when my sister died, and there's a lot of things going on in life, and this loss just kind of like added to that. It was so when you say pulling away, that it was that is that normal behavior of 26? I don't know that we don't know the details of exactly what pulling away means, but we don't also know the relationship before the loss, right? So I feel like sometimes parents will forget that there's life is in the way. Life doesn't stop. You have a lot of things going on with the relationships, work, school, maybe, everything going on, and now you have this added loss, and now you know all these extra things going on. So that could be. So I always will say is you kind of have to look at the situation, take the loss out and say, wait, are there other things going on that may be impacting that? And I'm sure maybe the loss didn't make it any easier, just kind of made it worse. Heidi.
Well, Keith, you're reminding me of something which was so important in my own situation because I was 20 and we're talking about someone in their 20s and I was trying to separate from like you're saying, separate and individuate and move away from the family. But when my brother died, my parents pulled me back in. And like Sarah said, when they talk about my brother, when I was sad, they would get more sad, which would shut me down because I was trying to be a good kid and not upset them anymore because they'd been through enough. And I also couldn't live in that space 24/7. It was too overwhelming to always be grieving because I was trying to be a 20-year-old also.
Yeah, for me, I was away at college. I went right back to school, and probably I don't know if anybody knew what happened. So I think for me, I just kind of was like ran back to school. I think we're trying to figure out how to hold it together, what this life is going to look like now without our sibling, which is such a big relationship. Whether we realize it, when we're young and fighting, we don't realize how big it is until you lose the sibling, how big of a that relationship is, and so that I'm sure has a lot to play into it as well. Let's see. Next question. Is there anyone on the panel who later discovered common ground with their parents to discuss the grief of parent sibling? And if so, did you recognize some noticeable similarities of your grief?
Both of my parents are actually bereaved siblings. Um, and I have a stronger relationship with my mom than my dad, so I think that it was easier for her and I to talk about that and for me to recognize her not only as a bereaved mom but also a bereaved both of them bereaved siblings. And yeah, I think there is definitely common ground, and within my family we are able to openly talk about our loved ones that have died, and it's isn't just my brother. So I'm really grateful for that in my family.
I think I would say, oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to add in when it comes to finding common ground, I think that's something for me, it also came after time. I know, as I said it earlier, I didn't really talk to my parents very much when I was younger. I was only 9 when my two brothers died. And so it took quite a while for me to open up. I mean, nowadays we are pretty open about it, but it has been more than 20 years. My mom and I do workshops together where we talk about our distinct feelings. So I think that for kind of a example of how it can be a more positive relationship going forward, it just took time for us, and it wasn't something that happened initially.
I think just the one thing I was going to throw in is when I became a parent, um, I think it gave me a window into what potentially, like, oh my God, like what that could look like. I think we all look at our grief from our own window, right? Siblings, we look at it from how it impacted us. Often we get stuck in this tug of war of who, whose is worse. But I think for me, when I became a parent, that, oh my God, I can't even imagine, going down that thought pattern of what would be like. So I think that's the one area where for me it would be um, that when I became a parent. Sarah?
I just wanted to say, I think going to TCF is what truly helped my mom and I better our relationship in our grief and to better understand one another. I think a lot was through this exact workshop at the conference and just encouraging her to do some work on her own and allow me to do mine on my own. But then, after a few conferences, we were able to finally like open up the lines of communication a little bit more than we were in the beginning. Those first few years are really rough, and communication with anyone was pretty difficult, let alone just my parents.
Allie?
Well, and Keith, I think the other thing is back to this idea around we can't compare grief, right? Like that when we get into this grief one-upmanship kind of space, like my grief is worse than your grief, or, we need the opportunity to talk with one another who are in kind of similar boats, right? Like siblings talking with siblings, parents talking with parents, so that we can talk about what aspects are unique around parent grief versus sibling grief. And that begins to kind of take some of that edge off of it and then create a space where then we can come together and begin to say, I've had a chance to kind of talk about how frustrated I feel about, my perspective or kind of where I'm at. Now I can come together and we can begin to leave behind grief one-upmanship and begin to find commonality that says we both had somebody we loved a great deal who is not coming back. And we've got to figure out what are we going to do about that? And how do we think about, I want to live my loved one's legacy, but I don't want to do so at the expense of my own identity. And so how do we make sure that we're thinking about, I want to make sure that I'm talking about my brother, I want to talk about my sibling, but I also don't want to lose my own right to be a human and to be different than who he was, right? That I'm not just the legacy carrier for my sibling, I am also a person too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Heidi, go ahead.
Well, with that, adding to that, I think the common ground for my family and probably for a lot of families out there is it turned our world upside down and it changed the dynamics completely. And I lost the emotional availability of my parents. I lost, like, we had to figure out who are we now as a family with this big void and how do we find our new normal? And it takes a long time. And like you said, Sarah, coming to Compassionate Friends normalized so much for me. And my mom and I, we work together and we have a lot of common ground, but we still disagree. And that's okay.
Right. I think time plays a factor in how long it's been. I think also the previous relationship. I mean, I think everyone hopes that, oh, you're going to come together and depending on what the relationship was before the loss, right? But I think the steps forward have to be open communication and voicing to actually say, hey, um, I'd like to talk. I would be open, like to talking. And I think that's the important piece that has to happen is the communication to say, um, and also be open to if they're not ready. If they say, I don't want to talk about it, or if they kind of shut down, not to jump on them and pressure them. But I think time and persistence gently help open that doorway to the communication. Um, the next question we have is, it's been a number of years since the death of our son, and we have made tremendous movement. What are your thoughts on if a parent should inquire if the surviving sibling have any thoughts or questions around their experiences, our family journey now, about our family journey now that we're all further along? Lucy.
I had a really good conversation with my dad several years ago, actually, about my the last like year or so of my brother Tony's life and how I was in college when my brother got diagnosed with cardiomyopathy and he was hospitalized and almost died. And that was the last time I actually saw him alive. And he ended up getting better, moving, and then dying a few months after that. And we just kind of like had all taken for granted that he was going to get better and stay healthy again. And I like several years ago asked my dad, like, well, why didn't I know how sick he was? Like, why was I not made aware of how sick he was? And I felt like I had some resentment towards my parents prioritizing my college education over my relationship with and time with my brother. And it was really cathartic when my dad, in like just full transparency, says, I don't think I knew how sick he was. And showed his vulnerability in that moment that like he also I don't think grasped how serious his the illness was because I don't think my brother led us on and to know like really how sick he was and like I now at 15 years into my nursing career know a lot more things than I did at 19 and like would give my, I would act differently and my parents I think would have made different choices knowing then what we know now. And thankfully it was a really like healing conversation where I was, my dad was vulnerable with me and I can, you know, give him grace knowing that he did the best he could with what he knew at the time.
Yeah, I think that's the key important piece is that communication. I think that's the and Allie, I'll let you jump in. But I know I keep beating it down because being in the middle of conversations with sibs and with parents and always the missing factor, I think, is that nobody steps forward to kind of open that door to starting conversations. And Allie, go ahead.
Lucy, I really like what you said about kind of your dad being vulnerable and just being human, right? Like being able to call it out because when I was afraid of if this happened to my brother, could this happen to me? Right? Like could I die too? And for my family, we had a bonding moment when my mom said, I actually am really worried about that too. Like you're the last
Mm.
one standing, and it's terrifying for me when you go out the door. And it was like in that moment, she wasn't my mom who I was an adversary to at that moment, right? She was just another human who was as scared as I was. And so we could just have a minute where we were like both scared. And then we're like, all right, well, there aren't any guarantees at the end of this. Like, there is not an answer that's going to like put a force field or a bubble around me and make me safe. But I will also tell you, walking out the door, I was better at making sure I called when I got somewhere. I was better at understanding like she was feeling nervous. I was feeling nervous when she went out the door, right? Like it gave me some empathy. And if she had said, I want you to call, I want you to do this, I would have felt smothered. But by her saying, I, you're scared, I'm scared too. Like we're both scared. Like that humanness suddenly opened a door that became conversation versus us just knocking heads against each other.
Well, and Allie, I think to go off of what you said earlier about like not comparing grief, and that was something like that conversation my dad and I had where we both admitted that like we didn't realize the severity of the illness until after my brother had died, that it wasn't whose grief is harder or worse or whose life sucks more. It was we both missed this person and shoulda, coulda, woulda, you know.
Well, and to add on to what you were both saying, Something my mom did, which really helped, and it took her several years after my brother died to do this. She came to me like 4 years after, and after going to Compassionate Friends, and said, Heidi, wow, I'm sorry that I didn't show up for you in the way you needed it. And it really helped me. I said, Mom, that's okay. I know you did the best you could at the time. You were overwhelmed with your own grief. But the fact that she acknowledged that really helped me.
And it's interesting, Allie, because I sort of went the opposite direction. We never had that open communication of like, oh, I'm scared. It was just unsaid. I knew that they were scared for me, and I knew I was scared, so I couldn't take the risks and do the things that I needed to. So I had to actually set boundaries around them because they would be texting me all the time, and they would be calling me and wanting me. I used to joke around that I needed to text them when I went from the living room to the bathroom because it was like that kind. But then they were also absent at the same time, dealing with their own grief. So the emotionality was that I needed, or the emotional support I need, wasn't there. But yet that overbearing, that hovering was there all the time. And so I had to actually set up some boundaries. They didn't know that until I started talking about it, but I had to like really set some boundaries so that to kind of show them that I wasn't going to text them every single minute of every day.
Yeah. I have a question. Next question says, how can siblings handle their parents' emotions?
Really easily, we don't. I mean, to that's my fast brash answer, but like my parents' emotions are not my responsibility. I am in control of me and how I respond. And if my parents are choosing to say things or act in a way that I don't want to be around, then I can, like Jason said, set those boundaries.
Let's do this. Let's do young Lucy and adult Lucy, right? So
Oh,
let's do this for young Lucy.
oh yeah. So then, but here's the thing is like young Lucy, I've been bereaved my entire life.
Right.
And so I
So,
don't know any other existence. And um
I just was asking, did
yeah.
it change over time,
Oh yeah,
or
no,
is
it's
that
absolutely yeah, like it's absolutely changed because it was a lot scarier. Like seeing my dad grieve was a lot harder for me when I was little because when you're little, like your parent is this superhero
right?
that is supposed to protect you and save you. And to see them, you know,
Break,
bereft is
break. Yeah.
so abnormal and hard to understand. Um, and so and then there was a lot of comparisons where, my dad would talk about how, well, when Doug died, he still had to go to work and he went to court and continued his law practice, like, because that's what he had to do. And so like as an adult now I can say, okay, if you're going to make comparisons, that's not helpful.
Right.
We're not going to have this conversation. But like I was in a different spot as a little kid where it's like, you know, I didn't yet know that my parents were fallible.
Right. Jenny, you want to add something?
Yeah, I lost my brother when I was 15 years old. And to Lucy's point, you see your parents as this, force to be reckoned with in your home. And from one moment to the next, everything changes and they're crumbling before your eyes. And we all are together, but there's an instant role reversal that happens. Managing your parents' emotions isn't really a choice so much as it is thrust upon you when you see that you need to step up and provide support a different way for the family dynamic. So my parents, as much as we say we are the surviving siblings, I try to hold the perspective too that they are the surviving parents. I was watching a different version of my parents born in front of me after their loss. And I too was becoming a completely different person, instantly adulting at the age of 15 to have to take on their care as well as my own care. And what did that mean? I was also navigating what it was to be a teenager and going through high school at the time. And that in itself is very hard. There's the element of, had this not happened, I was already in a state of life is hard because I was figuring out who I was as a person and into my adulthood. And then we add on the fact that this loss took place and, I was the youngest. I'm the baby of three. We lost my oldest brother, who was 25 at the time. And my middle brother was drowning in his guilt. They had a 3-year difference. They had been out at the same party that night. So he was just as absent as my parents. I was the one that had to step in and really just care for everybody and take on that role. But, to the theme of time, it does change. I like to think that the humanness in us is that we can only meet people at the depth of our own experience, and we try to relate to our own experience. And so my parents trying to understand me from their point of view and their loss, not really the curiosity yet because they're still navigating what they're going through. And then me also trying to figure that out. We're not really communicating. We're just trying to make sense and survive. But as time goes on and we build that self-awareness, the conversations kept expanding. We start building healthy boundaries. We kind of found our way back to each other over time. But yeah.
I just want to add something to what Jennifer said because it reminds me of myself. I was 20, but I also was thrust into the role of now taking care of my parents. And it was really scary because I'd never seen my parents so vulnerable, so, crying, etc. And I was like, is this my new life forever? Like, it's terrifying at the beginning to see that for kids, no matter how old they are.
Right. Which could lead to where you start to see the pulling away, right? Where we start to become the rock. We won't show our emotions. So if people are wondering where that kind of starts from, it starts from wanting to be strong when we see now our parents have these emotions in front of us that we're not used to seeing. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, and you also have to remember that everyone expresses emotions differently. So I remember that I went down a very physical route, so I needed to really start to take care of my body a little bit better, and that's how I learned to manage my grief a little bit that way. My parents didn't see it as that. They're like, he's not dealing with his grief, but the fact is that I was. It just in a different way than they were, and they couldn't understand that. And I had a sort of a similar judgment where I even saw them rehashing the same stories over and over and over again and not actually moving forward. And so I judged them for that. So there was definitely it wasn't until later that we actually got that. I think maybe when I taught my first yoga class at a Compassionate Friends conference, did it click in my mom's head that she's like, oh, he is dealing with his grief, just not in a way that I am assuming it is. So we each held our own space. They dealt with it in their way, and I dealt with it in mine.
Right. Go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one more thought. In the midst of navigating all this too, this is when we start having the tug of war in how we hold space for one another. That's also something that I think we learn over time on how to hold space. If my parents were, feeling emotional, I immediately reserved my feelings to hold space for them. I couldn't be vulnerable with them. That was just like the protector in me, that sense of me needing to now be strong for them. And the other side of that is there were times where I needed to let that guard down. I needed to just share something or let it out. And I wanted them to hold space. And it would be difficult if they met me with their tears and they're breaking down with me. Now, that immediately stopped me because I felt like I was bringing pain into the space for them. So just being conscious also of how we hold space for one another early on is important, I think, for us to start opening the door to welcoming the vulnerability, welcoming the conversation, better understanding what each of us are carrying. we both lost this person in our life, but our grief experience is very different because of the relationship was very different.
Yeah. I have a parent asked, the surviving son was present when the sibling died, and the surviving sibling was 11. That surviving sibling is now 23, very angry and estranged from the parents. Any suggestions? Oof. Allie.
So the thing about anger is that it's the thing we see first, and it's the thing maybe you're expressing first, but underneath it, it's kind of like the tip of the iceberg. Underneath it is a whole bunch of stuff, right? It could be about being vulnerable. It could be about, sometimes anger is what comes out of my mouth because I'm feeling cheated or robbed or upset or powerless or scared, right? And so, being able to begin to create some other words or some other expressions, right? That, what else is anger, right? What's below anger? Even being able to say, this is where, sometimes anger, it comes out as anger, but I'm feeling helpless. Even just being able to name it, right, yourself can begin to model a little bit. And I think, we've talked a lot about how do you get your kids to talk? How do you get your kids, your surviving children, no matter how old they are? I think a piece of it is about invitation, but then also another piece is about modeling a little bit around saying, we can talk about it and not have it turn into something where we're going to talk about it for 5 hours, right? We can have a memory and have that conversation. I can say sometimes I'm feeling angry, and what I'm also feeling is helpless or scared. And that models it, but also says we don't have to go into, we don't have to now turn this into a family session where we're going to talk for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there, right? So they said the sibling was 11, which means I hope, professional help. Really, I always say self-help group for me is the only thing that would have helped me, but I was a little older. But 11, I think, is such a delicate age. And now 23, angry. But do we know that has anything to do with the loss of the sibling? Like with this, there's a lot of things that go on with 23-year-olds and their parents. I think the key there is continuing to try to open the door and reestablish because it says they're estranged. So um, I would also, I know this is the hard part, is look in the mirror. What what's their side? If I was to talk to him and say, what is annoying about your parents? Why are you running from your parents? What is it? I'm sure and you may not agree with it, but I'm sure there's things there that you could look at to say, what could we do to try to, to bridge that and reopen that door, that communication. Um, Go ahead, Andrea.
I am a mom of a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old, both girls, and they were 6 and 4 when John died. And my being the only sibling left, my mother would come over. She would come over anyway to help me with the girls while I worked and just suffocate them, just hold them and cry. And I couldn't deal with that. It was breaking my heart. I couldn't breathe in my own home. And like Jason said, I had to have boundaries with my parents. Because it was too much for me. I was trying to grieve, be a mom, work and live and deal with everything at once. It's very hard, but I've always told my girls that, I always want you to come to me if you, with whatever, but if you're not coming to me, talk to somebody else, somebody that can help you. And just open communication. It's just, I always would say, I'm having a sad moment. I miss Uncle Johnny. And just telling them that it's not because of them that I'm upset, I think also helped them too, to realize that mommy has sad times and we can give her a hug and be there for her. Just communicate. It's really important.
Yeah, Heidi.
Yeah, I don't know about this situation, but Allie said something, and so did Andrea, which I can identify with. My father would kind of trap me, and he'd start talking about my brother, and it would go on and on and on. And I'm like, I have got to get out of here. Like, I'm not a therapist because I wasn't at that time. And my
Mhm.
dad is expecting me to show up as his like counselor. And I have to live a 20-year-old life. So it was like I was constantly trying to figure out how not to be trapped in a car with him or not to be trapped with him too long because I knew he would be grieving for a very long time.
Jason.
Yeah, I think we all have to look at our relationship with anger. I know in my household, anger was not an acceptable emotion. We wanted to do everything that we can to keep that anger under wraps. And in fact, anger can be a very good motivating emotion to get you to do stuff that you don't necessarily want to do. And so when my parents would annoy or piss me off, and then I go to express the anger, it would have to be shut down. So I would say, like, look at your like whoever's if you're judging somebody else's anger, look how you respond to it. What is your relationship with the anger? Because maybe you're not creating a space where that anger, is acceptable, and then wondering why it's, when someone feels that they pull away.
And the last one, go ahead, Andrea. Oh, okay. She took her hand away. Yeah. I'm a mom to Lucy who died 25 years ago as an infant. She has an older brother who was almost 3 when she died. She has 2 younger brothers who never met her. Is there anything I can do to be supportive as they age and eventually have their own children? Lucy, I know.
Okay, so this is my like area of expertise. I appreciate that I knew about my brother growing up. Like I was a baby when he died, and I was raised that we still celebrated his birthday. We had the pictures of him on the wall. It was a little shrine like um but not like there were pictures of me on the wall too, so it was okay. And and I grew up listening to stories about him, and so even as a little kid I would say that I had two brothers, two big brothers, one in California and one in heaven. And so it was just like he was just any other family member to me. And I don't have children of my own, but I have three nieces. Um, my youngest sister has three daughters who also know all about Uncle Doug and Uncle Tony, and we'll point them out in pictures and celebrate their birthdays and remember them at Christmas and things like that. And that's because I think my sisters and I have, just like my dad did, continued to share stories and talk about them and the memories we have and that we love them. Um and so at 3 and 5, my nieces know and will point out pictures of Uncle Doug and Uncle Tony and talk about how much they love them.
Yeah. My wife's son, we'll jump to the next question because I know we have a lot. My wife's son died last year. His sister moved recently to the UK. Should we do anything to remind her it is okay to enjoy her new life, not feel guilty that she has this new great opportunity? Hmm. S- Jenny?
I'll jump in on this one. I feel like they named it in 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 that sentence, continue to reiterate that you're proud of them um, moving forward with whatever it is that's aligning in their life. There's a part of us that feels guilty when moments of joy come back into our lives after such a great loss. Are we allowed to be doing this? Does this mean that we don't love them? Does this mean that we're forgetting them? Does this mean that we're moving on? And grief gets a bad rap. I think that people think we're gonna get over the hump of grief and it'll be gone. And the truth is, it's with us forever, but it changes shape along the way. And in the beginning, it's very heavy. The other side of the coin of grief is that it shows us how to appreciate life differently. Um, we've been given an opportunity to look at life with different lenses, and we carry a deeper appreciation for our experiences now. And that means awakening moments of joy again in our life and how we can still love them in those moments and carry them with us in those moments and continue to be a version of us now where we love them and we grow with them differently. So I would say just keep letting them know that it's okay. Keep letting them know that you're here for them, that you advocate for them, that you're doing your best to do the same. Because that's all that we really need, just the reassurance that it's all okay.
Yeah, Jason.
And just to add on that, not just tell them, but model that behavior that you want to see. So if you want them to really be excited about their life, you have to find reasons in your life to be excited because we're taking our cue. A lot of times we take our cues from you. And if we don't see you celebrating the things that you want to celebrate, then we take that cue as well. So if you model the behavior, because I know it took my mom and dad probably about 5 years or so before they could enjoy anything. And then my mom was just like, okay, I'm done feeling terrible. Let's, go on a vacation together. And so so it does take time, but model the behavior that you're looking to see because we're taking the cues from you.
Right. Jenny, was that from before or you just did it up? Oh, there you go.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. Parents, how do you best help the surviving sibling who lost two siblings over the years and has really been struggling with mental health? I mean, I'll just say we try to avoid the comparison of, lost one sibling, lost two siblings, is losing two siblings worse, how they lost, how the loss. I'll let you jump in and give a better answer, but I feel like it's go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that can happen is we somehow have in our brains that, oh, I have experience with grief, so therefore I'm somehow better at it this time around, or I know what to expect. And the thing is yes, you might know what to expect, but it doesn't make it hurt any less, right? And what can happen is these cumulative losses can end up feeling overwhelming, like, oh my God, everyone I love dies, right? And so really around saying, do you ever feel overwhelmed, right? I feel overwhelmed, right? Like one of the things I think that opens the door, and someone else was asking a question around how do you open the door, is around holding that right balance around saying, sometimes I feel this way. Do you ever feel that way? So you're opening the door, giving permission, modeling the way, but also not then turning the whole conversation into it's all about me. And then suddenly the person feels like now I suddenly have to come and lift you up when I was struggling or having a hard time. And so, I think it's really striking that right balance around, sometimes I feel like everybody I know, or gosh, there are a lot of people in our family who are dying, and that's really hard. And I'm feeling overwhelmed by that. And here's what I do sometimes to deal with feeling overwhelmed.
Chris?
So I lost two brothers at the same time. And I would second the feeling overwhelmed. I think that I often found myself trying to compare the two, and I found myself struggling with, oh well, I feel more grief towards this brother than the other one, and so on. And I think it's a very common thing to feel about multiple loss is that we have a tendency to do some kind of comparison. For me, what was helpful was talking to other people who were in a similar situation. So, I mean, I know Lucy has her hand up and she has multiple sibling loss as well. And it's something that we've talked about over the years. And it is very difficult. It's different. There's no comparison that's happening. But it is different. And I I felt overwhelmed and I would just really relate to what Ali said there.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, so Chris and I have actually co-presented a workshop on multiple sibling grief for years now. And I like, want to echo that, like, you can't, like, we have to remind each other, you can't compare the losses. Um, because the people are different, the relationships are different, the place you are in life when these losses happen are different. And so what I wonder is, this person, this surviving sibling, struggling with mental health because of grief, or are they just struggling because they're struggling?
Right.
Because
Maybe both.
I can also say, as somebody who has struggled with my own mental health for off and on for years, sometimes that had nothing to do with my grief and everything to do with just the way my brain is wired for whatever reason. And it's been very helpful for me to take care of myself physically, making sure I'm like eating and sleeping and hydrated, but also working with a therapist who is trauma informed and aware of basically all of the baggage that I've brought with me, and reminding myself to give myself grace that if I miss one brother more today, that's okay. It doesn't mean I love the other one less.
Right. Jenny?
Yeah, multiple loss is one of these areas that I find myself in a gray space. There's a few topics. Another one that comes to mind is Jordan when he does Suddenly Alone. I'm the youngest of three siblings, but my middle brother, my other surviving sibling, has really estranged himself from the family. So there were elements of that that made me feel like I had lost two brothers. Um, when it comes to multiple loss, I'm not comparing it with my brother's estrangement, but in the element of, I lost my brother on November 14th. 2 weeks later, I lost my grandmother on Thanksgiving morning. 6 months later, I lost my grandfather. A few months after that, my other grandparent, my godfather, and I was in high school and unfortunately living in Vice City, had lost several friends. All of these losses back to back to back within the span of a year, 2 years, 3 years, really set me on a path of how Ali mentioned. Does everyone in my life die? Is there something wrong with me that I'm coming around into relationships and I'm putting this juju on the people that I love? Or what is the meaning of life? It really set me on a course of meaning making. But I also feel like it impacted the speed of my processing, the complexity of having experienced different losses in different time periods. When I was trying to process the first one, which was my brother, really had me numb. I was searching for the things that I liked again, that brought me joy, the relationships that made sense. I didn't know where I fit in my sense of community, the friends that I could connect with. But also, to the point of Chris and Lucy, each of these losses had different roles and relationships in my life. And then I was also reflecting on what it is to not have grandparents anymore too at the age of 15, at the same time that I had lost my brother. And seeing everyone else, and people watching now, they still have their siblings or they still have their grandparents and the roles that these people still play in their lives. So I think it's really important to allow your child to have the space to just make sense of what's happening, because that's where we both are, following a loss. You're trying to make sense of what it means to be a parent now after the loss of your child, and we're trying to make sense of what it is to be a sibling carrying all these losses while also contributing to the family dynamic and picking up on the roles and changes that are needed of us at the same time. It can really stunt our personal process because we're also in a state of giving to the family for whoever needs us and the role that we're playing. I feel like, at least for me, I had my life on hold for like 6 to 7 years before I finally was able to grasp the benefits of peer support and allowing peer support to bring that hope and possibility back into my life.
I always say, bring your child to the conference. Bring them to bribe them, get them to the conference, and let us know, and we kind of can help that way. That segues into the next question. What is something you wish your parents had done to help you with your grief? Katie.
I wish my parents would have been more validating. Um, at this point, my parents and I are completely estranged, but I can remember when we were in the hospital, my mom's first comment, my sister and I were extremely close. The first thing my mother said was, I carried her for 9 months. I don't know why you're so upset. And that was the worst. So I feel like if parents would validate it and understand it's different. Everybody's relationship is different and everybody's going to handle it in a different way. But minimizing somebody else's grief is never going to put you on a better step or put you on a better path.
Right. Chris?
I wish my parents would have given me more space. I think Jason mentioned earlier that he felt like he had to text his parents when he walked from the living room to the bedroom or whatever his phrasing was. I felt the same way. You know, I was a child when my two brothers died. I feel like I missed out on what life was like as a teenager. I feel like I didn't get to have my teenager experiences until I was in my 20s because every time I wanted to do something, my parents would ask a million questions of where are you going? Who are you going with? What are you doing? And it was so much more scrutiny than anyone else of my same age was going on. So I always wanted space. And I actually remember, I don't know if she remembers, but I remember my parents and I sat down with Heidi like 15 years ago to have a conversation about this, probably longer than 15 years ago, about kind of how to establish some boundaries for that. And so that would be one of the top things I would hope for if I could go back is to get more space so I could actually experience what it was like to be a teenager. Because of course I'm dealing with a very difficult loss, but we still have to go through our life milestones. And I didn't feel like I got to fully experience those.
Just to add on to that, Chris, I remember that conversation and I remember your parents being so concerned about you and coming to me and saying, our son isn't talking to us enough. He's not grieving with us. We're worried about him. Can you talk to him? And I did. And I knew you. And I went to them and they said, can you tell me what's going on with him? I said, yeah, he's a normal kid. This is normal. And he's being a good kid. He doesn't want to cause you any more pain. You've been through enough.
And
Yeah,
along
Jason.
those lines, it's something I wish my parents didn't do is to keep pushing to try to try to deal with the grief the same way that they were dealing with. I had to find my own way, and they kept insisting and insisting and insisting. And I wish they would have like also backed off a bit when it came to that.
Allie?
My parents did a lot of great things, and we had a shrine in my home growing up. I was a only surviving child. I will tell you there were more pictures of my brother around that home than there were of me, and it felt a bit like living with a ghost. And so, at some point, I was giving tours of the shrine. We were a military family, so we always moved, and I was charging a quarter a piece to go look at the shrine. And my mom overheard it and was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I might as well make some money off of this because, like clearly we have an entire room dedicated to him, and what is it going on?" And so at that point, that opened the conversation, but that was many years down the road, right? And so for how many years did I live with someone who couldn't get bad grades, who didn't make mistakes, who never got grounded, who never did dumb things, right? And so just always feeling like whatever I did was not quite enough to make up for the fact that that now there was only one of us, right? And so what they could have done was to have Lucy, I thought you had a great piece around pictures of me and pictures of him, right? Like that it didn't feel like somehow the living person was less than the angel.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah, to that same point, I think it would have been helpful to just be more included in decision making in general. Like we are not celebrating the holidays. I don't feel like I had a say on what the holidays could look like for us after the loss. So kind of living in a house where they were kind of making the calls based off of where they were and not feeling like I was included in the dialogue for my feelings to also be considered and how we can honor this in a way that can align for all of us. That would have been really helpful early on.
So this one, it's long. I tried figuring out how to paraphrase it, but I don't know if I can. So what can you do to help the siblings when you want to respect their space and their grieving? I have my four sons. I lost my daughter. They lost their sister. I have one son who asks, "How am I?" comes with me to visit her. My three other sons haven't really asked or don't say her name. And when I mention their sister's name, it's like I've sucked the air out of the room. I've been pretty clear about my sadness. I've asked about their feelings. Not sure if I should bring up her name up. On April 2nd, it will be 1 year since she passed. No one says anything. I don't push or insist when they don't want to visit her with me. I haven't asked any of them to be sad, but acknowledge that I may be sad and that any mention of her won't make me sad. So if I'm understanding the piece is to visit her at meaning at the cemetery, I'll just go on and say I don't visit the cemetery, never have. It's I don't feel any connection to a piece of land and the stone. So um, I think everybody grieves different. So I don't think that's one piece I think you should push away is to say because they're not visiting that they're not grieving or they're not doing it right or whatever that case may be. The second piece is 1 year is so new. I avoided it. I ran back to school. One first year is kind of like numb. So I'll let the panel start answering, but I think I just wanted to point out some key things that kind of jumped out at me is 1 year is really soon. Um, Two, the fact that you mentioned boys and they see their mom sad. So I think that's a hot flag for me as well. Um, and so I'll toss the softballs out. Lucy, you can jump in, and I see Heidi too, but go ahead, Lucy. Oh, you took her hand down. Okay, Heidi.
Okay, just a couple of things. One, I hate the cemetery. I never go. It used to piss my parents off a lot because they love it. It brings them comfort. And like Jennifer said, and Jen said, they force me to go. I'm like, I don't like this. I feel close to my brother in other ways.
Right.
And the other thing is, and this might not be the person that just wrote in, but it's my personal experience. I have two sisters. There's three girls in our family. My brother was in a sea of girls. He was the middle. We adored him. He wasn't perfect, but we adored him. When he died, I felt like the wrong child had died because he was the only boy and there were three girls. And I felt like my parents would have been better off if I had died, even though I know that's not rational. But grief is not rational, which is why I love my TCF sibs because I know I'm not alone now. Other people feel that way.
Yeah, well, and I think, really to echo what Keith said is that like that 1 year is so early. And my heart just pours out to everybody who's so early in their grief because I like it at 1 year it seems so daunting. But that's so new. And at that point, like you're just trying to figure out how to exist
Not break.
day to day. And it's a good day if you put deodorant on and changed your underwear, let alone like thinking about bigger picture items.
Yeah.
So I think this question asker sounds like they're doing a good job of trying to be open about where they're at and open to saying their daughter's name and having conversations and but like yeah, I mean to echo what a lot of the other panel is saying is that we all grieve differently and for some people the cemetery or the shrine is really comforting and for other people it's not.
Yeah, it took me, my mom found TCF early. I avoided it. Took me 5 years before I actually started talking to siblings. So year one is really just kind of they're trying to figure it out. So I think it's okay for you to communicate and say that, you could ask them if it upsets them if they talk about your daughter, right? You can ask them to see how they respond, right? Um, Probably I think there's a lot more to it of as boys don't want to see their mom upset, so they're going to avoid it. And yeah, it may right now it may suck the air out of the room because they don't want to sit and be sad, be and see you watch you cry, right? So we probably would like to avoid that probably. If possible. So that's probably why they're not talking about her is because they don't want to see that reaction from you, right? As much as you want to talk about it, I doubt that they do. And it also depends on their age and there's a lot of other factors that we don't know, but I would say likely that they're just trying to avoid it. Give it time, continue communication and talking about letting them know that, hey, it helps me. Just so you know, it helps me. I did that with my friends and family. I told them, I don't, I want you to talk about my sister. Don't think that I'm having a good day and that you're going to upset me. So from very early on, just told everybody, hey, I want you to talk about my sister. I don't want her to be forgotten. So, I was open to what I wanted, but, you can do that with your children and see what they, see what they, how they answer, how they respond. Jason, go ahead. What do you want to
Yeah,
add?
just like around like sort of going to the cemetery. I'm once again like you, Keith. I'm not a fan. Like I don't find comfort there. But there's something happened actually a few years ago where I know my parents go there every year for birthday and for death day, and they would be there. And for a long time, I thought they would be there and actually sit there and cry. And so a couple of years ago, I decided to go with them. And I was actually very surprised because they went in there, they cleaned up the grave, and they're like, all right, let's go for lunch. And I was like, what? Like, what? It really surprised me because I had this like fantasy in my head that they're still sitting there by the graveside crying for hours. Because I hadn't gotten such a long time, I was actually, surprised that they just went there to clean the stuff up. So yeah.
Jenny.
Yeah, I just want to also add, and maybe this also ties in with the earlier question of, what parents could have done differently that would have helped. But I would say, be conscious of your communication style, having healthy boundaries around what you're communicating with your children. And what do I mean? It's okay for you to express that you're sad. We're going too far if you're saying that you don't want to live anymore. You're adding concern onto us. We're going too far if in a moment of frustration because we're still growing up. You're comparing us to our other sibling. We're two completely different people. We were from the moment we were born. And the other concerning form of communication is when you start using the child. I'll speak for myself, right? My mom would use me as her therapist, and she wouldn't even notice, that she's got these concerns. She's unloading her feelings. She's unloading her processing because, I'm her daughter and I'm her friend. But we have to have clear boundaries. There's things I don't want to know that my parents are going through or what they're processing because now I'm carrying even more concern for their well-being and their mental health. And this also shut down conversation with us and connection with us for a really long time. So yeah, if I felt like they were sad and I felt like that sadness was going to seep into me now carrying other emotional baggage and other emotional concern for them while I'm still just trying to maintain the capacity for self. That could also get overwhelming.
Yeah. My son died. I'm going to jump to the next question. Sorry. So we have a lot, and I want to try to get to as many as we possibly can, and I do apologize. My son died in a car accident just before his 17th birthday 4 years ago. His younger brother struggled with becoming older than his sibling. The day he past him was dreaded and difficult. Did not know how significant that date was for a younger sibling. My daughter, my youngest, is now approaching that same milestone. What advice do you have to help her navigate this? Chris, go ahead.
That was something that I fixated on a lot. I'm a very math person just in general, so I'm kind of obsessed with numbers anyway. I kind of obsessed over both of my reaching the ages of both of my brothers. I obsessed over when they had been gone longer than they had been alive, when they had been gone longer than I had known them. All these types of things I really obsessed over, and it just took me some time to kind of come to grips with that. And accepted those were normal feelings for me to have. Another thing kind of related to that that I struggled with is as the youngest, I've become the first to do basically every milestone. I'm the first to graduate college, the first to have a career, the first to do all kinds of things, which I was never expecting to be the first to do any of those things. So it is very difficult to come to terms with that role reversal. And I think for me personally, it was just kind of realizing those feelings are normal. It's normal to fixate on those things, at least in my case. And hearing from other people that they also felt the same way made me feel like I wasn't going crazy.
Katie?
Um, my sister died right after she turned 40, about 2 months after, and we were 12 years apart. So I'm almost 43 this year, but as I turned 40, I was terrified of it. First I didn't want to celebrate because what if I died right after I turned 42? Because she had outpatient surgery. We couldn't really predict that. Um, so initially, I didn't want to celebrate my birthday. I felt like I'd lost my roadmap because sisters are going to share, oh, my skin's blotchy in my mid 30s or whatever those things are as you grow up. So I felt like I lost my whole roadmap. Um, and I found out that as bad as I thought it was, and it's hard. The anticipation was way worse than when I got there. And so now it still feels weird that, I'm 42 and she'll never be more than 40. So it's still a weird feeling and I still lost my roadmap. But one of the things that kind of helped me a lot is first of all, the sibs. If you talk to any of the sibs, a lot of them have gone through it or they understand that feeling, and that helps a lot. And the other thing is, I still talk to a lot of people that are close or were close to my sister. Her husband, still, every time I talk to him, I swear I learn a new story or something I didn't know before. So I think learning about more things about her, even as time goes on, helps. But just understanding that it is going to be awkward, but the anticipation will probably be worse than when it actually happens.
Right. Uh, my 30-year-old daughter doesn't want to talk to me about the loss of her brother. She has seen a grief counselor. I'm not looking to be her counselor, but I feel like it's creating a distance between the two of us when such a huge loss happened to both of us, but we can't talk about it. Sarah?
Yeah, so I was, I think, 27 when my brother passed away, and I lived about 13 hours from my family. So I got a lot of, I'm sorry, I just completely lost my complete
That's
train
okay.
of thought.
That's okay.
Lucy, you will go ahead and answer, and then I'll come back.
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead.
I it must be contagious.
Well, I'll say this, right? Um, how long, so what we don't know is how long it's been, how long the loss, so it's not in there. But they don't want to talk about the loss, and you have to maybe question why doesn't she want to talk about the loss to her
Well,
mom?
and I mean, I also wonder, like, because that mother parent or that mother daughter relationship is so hard too, that like,
Right.
what kind
What
of
else is there
relationship did you have
before the
before the
loss?
loss?
Before, yeah.
Right.
And like, did you have things in common before the loss?
Right.
And I know that is something that my mom and I struggle with because we have very different hobbies, we have very different viewpoints. And I wear my heart on my sleeve and I've got this big personality and my mother's very stoic and precise and so like grief
Oh, yeah.
aside, there's times I don't want to spend time with her because like she's too cautious. She doesn't want to do the things I want to do. So like that probably puts a strain on our relationship.
But
Okay.
I'm also wondering, and only because I hear it a lot from siblings, is, what are some of the things that you may have done or are doing that they don't want to talk to you about it, right? Like, did you not include them in any of the planning of the funeral or holidays or how to celebrate them, or right? Are you doing things that are actively upsetting them where they're now don't want to even talk about the loss with you because of those other things? So I'm not sure. I don't want to add things that aren't true, but
Or
I do know that it's true in a lot of scenarios where it creates a break between relationship.
Mine was kind of the opposite. So I was super close with my mom. So for me, it was really, really hard to see her hurting. So for me, I had to walk out of the room the second she started crying because I hurt for her.
Okay.
Like, even when I wasn't like not wanting to be in that space, just seeing her hurt me so much that it got to a point where we had to have that conversation, and I just had to say to my mom, like, Mom, seeing you hurts me. So it's not anything personal, but when you're hurting and I can't really be there for you right now, I need to step away. And it took a few good years before we were able to set those boundaries. But again, that open communication allowed me to tell her why I was not able to openly talk about my brother with her in those first few years.
Here's one interesting one. Were you all close to your siblings, or did any of you have a challenging relationship with your sib before they died? My daughter and son had their challenges, and I wonder if that makes it harder for her to open up. Maybe she feels guilty in some way. So I will preface and jump in before we even start and say, open up with whom? With you, the mom, right? Because I think that's different than her not opening up with other people or people she feels safe and comfortable with, or um who's her safety, who's her network, who's her right. So maybe she feels guilty in some way. Maybe. Anybody want to jump in and
I mean, I can speak to the fact that like my Tony and I are 16 years apart, and so especially when you're a child, it's like how much can you have in common with somebody who has that big of an age gap? And um he's technically my half sibling. We have the same dad, different moms, did not grow up in the same like household
right,
together. So like no, we weren't really close. And what part of what made the death harder was that in one regard is that we had like started getting a little closer um leading up, the months leading up to his death, and then he died.
right,
And and then I can also speak to like the fact that like I never knew my brother Doug to begin with at all. So we weren't close because we never met.
right,
And so then sometimes the grief I feel is this like loss of potential, and it's very abstract in what could have been and
right,
not what was.
right. Maggie?
Yeah, a couple of points. I There's a slight bit of jealousy when some of my other sibs say that their sibling was their best friend, because I was not best friends with my brother. We fought hard and we loved hard. And yeah, there were some definitely challenging dynamics. He had challenges in school and other challenges that we didn't know about until he was an adult, and it made the home situation really challenging sometimes. And a couple of other points that I just want to talk on because I know that we're getting close to our ending time is, early on, my dad, we had a big fight, and he said, "I've never done this before," and my response to him was, "None of us have," and so it's really um we're all of us seasoned sibs have now lived with our grief for a lot longer, but we can all step back into those first days, those first weeks, and those first months. And that's why each of us is on this panel so that we can help share how to move through those things. And we all have different journeys on what helped us. One of my pieces was grief education. Like I needed to learn what grief was. And Allie has talked several times tonight about being able to name feelings. Well, I'm in my early 40s and I didn't work on that until my late 30s. And it was really hard. Like that was a really hard thing for me. I know I have all these feelings, but to be able to name them and articulate them and share them with close family members is something that wasn't modeled to me. So I had to learn it and I have to do it. So there's all these different dynamics that we're talking about, right? And then they all get exaggerated when the most important person in our life dies.
Yeah. Jason?
Yeah, my sister and I had a really rough relationship too. We were like sometimes super close and then sometimes not, and we'd go back and forth. But the thing is that my relationship with her is with my relationship with her. It doesn't have anything to really do with my parents. And even to this day, there's a necklace that I wear that has a ballet slipper that was made from her gold, and I wear it for any special occasion. But I take a moment with it, and actually, my parents didn't even know that I still had this necklace that they actually made for me up until recently. And so I make sure that I take some time to still honor the relationship I had with my sister, regardless of what my parents think or do.
How do you feel when your parent brings up your sibling? Example, if you're out to dinner and your parent randomly says, "Oh, uh, Jarrell would have loved this place." For me personally, I don't mind. It helps me. It helps us remember my sister. Like why I don't want to avoid it actually. So I think it was a positive. But I would also depend on what year, like how long, far along. But I think even early on, I wanted to. I was afraid that everybody would forget about my sister. So to me, hearing about her, it didn't bother me. I actually liked it. Heidi?
I agree with what you're saying, Keith, everything you just said. And I have no problems with them bringing up Scott and talking about him. However, I do not want them to have expectations of how I should respond because
Mm,
sometimes I might not want to respond, and that needs to be okay.
right. That's fair. And Jason?
Yeah, I absolutely love when they bring it up. In fact, as I said like earlier, at about 5 years, my mom was like, "I'm done with this," so we started planning on trips. And then every time we would have like uh, Lauren's favorite drink was a Manhattan mudslide, and so we'd all have one in her honor and talk about her for a little bit, and knowing that so that it brings her into the family vacation, even though she's not here physically.
Allie?
Another thing is telling not just the good stories, right? The stories where someone got in trouble, the stories where someone did something not awesome, right? Just
Right.
be like they were human. They were three-dimensional human beings when they were alive. Can we have memories that are three-dimensional too?
Right. Be
Those weren't
authentic.
the good stories, Allie.
Some of the best stories are like the you didn't know this story.
Right. Yes. Well, we are coming up on 9 o'clock. I want to go ahead and first I want to apologize to the parents that we did not get to their questions. There's lots of them. I really tried getting through all different topics. I think somehow we may end up doing this again. We'll have to poke them and see if we do it again. Head Cindy, what do you want to say?
So I just wanted to ask really quick, Keith, to wrap it up.
Yes.
What was one of the best? Just pick one real quick, maybe from our panelists. What was the best thing that helped you through your sibling grief so far? Just one thing, quickly.
All of you.
Go ahead,
Should we
Katie.
all chant TCF Sibs?
Yeah,
TCF
Yeah.
Sibs.
that's right.
DCF Sibs.
Yes.
I think it's important for me. there was nothing that helped other than finding and talking to others that have lost. So I avoided it. So I needed my mom basically conned me to come, right? To get involved. She constantly was always nagging me about getting involved. I think it's important for parents to don't be overbearing every minute, but to kind of keep reminding them about TCF. I think it was annoying, yes, that my mom constantly brought it up, but I look back now and I'm glad she did. So,
Also, yes, also real quick, I think every panelist on here was bribed by our parents to get to a conference, national conference. Real quick, if you don't know about it, go to the TCF homepage, find out all kinds of information there. Secondly, I think some people have put the TCF SIBS newsletter information in our group chat. Make sure to take advantage of that. We'll try to make sure that's posted on some pages, especially following this. And I think Andy or someone had mentioned that this was going to be posted on the Compassionate Friends pages.
yes,
So, yeah.
Katie, and anybody else? Chris, I saw your hand was up. You could answer that question real quick.
Actually, the one thing that I just wanted to mention is I mentioned earlier I'm estranged from my parents, and I just appreciate so much to see that there are so many parents out there that are willing to make time in their day and sit through a webinar that they may not hear all the things that they want because they care about their kids. And I just want to say thank you for the parents who are doing that because it does not go unnoticed and it is very, very appreciated.
Yes, thank you very much, panel. I want to definitely thank you guys. You guys are awesome rock stars. We appreciate it, and we'll definitely see you guys. We'll see you in person. Hopefully, see you in person in 3 months at the conference.
Yay.
All righty.
Bye, guys. I'm ready for July. I need my hugs. Love
Yes.
y'all.
Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Cindy.
Bye
Love
bye.
Thanks,
y'all. Thank
everyone.
you.
I just wanted to
Thanks,
thank you guys
everyone.
before we close this off. Awesome webinar. Let's do it again. All right, we'll
Good.
Andy,
figure out
thank
some
you.
dates and we'll do this again. As
Thank you
soon as
very
I
much.
click this off, though, we all disappear. That's why I
Yes,
wanted to
I
say
know.
thank you and good night to everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Night.